behalf of the Provo City Municipal Council to our meeting on this Tuesday, the 20th of May. It is 5:32. We are met in the Municipal Council chambers. The meeting is being broadcast live on Provo City Channel 17 and channel17.provo.org, where it will be also available for on-demand viewing. The council requests that citizens help maintain the decorum of the meeting by turning off electronic devices, being respectful to council and administration members and others, and refraining from applauding during the proceedings of the meeting. I invite Mr. Parker to begin the roll call.
Wayne Parker. Gary Winterton.
Stephen Ailes. Gary Garrett.
Al Miller.
Kim Santiago.
Abe Sewell. Dave Van Buren.
Ryan Jones.
Matt Taylor.
The invocation will be provided by Eric Watkins, who will then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our most kind, gracious Father in heaven, we're so very thankful to be gathered together as members of the community and community leaders. We are thankful for all that we are blessed with to live in this wonderful country. We ask Thee to please bless us with Thy Spirit, that we might be enlightened and be able to lead this city in the directions that it should go, and that we might make good decisions. We're grateful for all those who are serving here and putting their time and energy into making this a better place. And these things we give Thee thanks for. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Will the audience please rise?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The audience may be seated.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. The public comment segment of the meeting is an opportunity for any person in attendance to comment on matters that do not appear on the official agenda. Items 1 and 2 have in fact been dedicated, that is, will be accompanied by a public hearing. Should you wish to make a comment at the podium, please speak into the microphone. Begin by stating your name and city of residence. Should you not wish to speak, but instead to have your statement read aloud by the recorder, please provide her with a copy of that statement at her desk. Those who speak should do so courteously and briefly. Please be aware that the council administration will not take any formal action on the matters that arise during public comment, but they may respond informally as appropriate. Also, please be aware of other means for addressing the council and administration directly regarding issues of concern by email, telephone, social media, all of which are listed at the Provo City website, provo.org. Many issues also may be addressed directly by telephoning 311. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium.
Hello there. My name is Tanner Jones. I currently live with 2 roommates just south of campus of BYU. I was introduced to local politics only last year, just a little north from here. I was on the inner circle team of Tom McDonald. I know probably you guys were busy campaigning yourselves to be too interested in what the guys up in Orem were doing, but I was part of his inner circle team that helped him win by a bigger margin for his city council race than it's ever been seen in Orem for the last 2 decades. And we also raised more money than we ever had, than any other city council member has in Orem before. My job in all of that was I was in charge of all of his online and marketing and fundraising that came through the online portal. Now, while I never thought I'd so soon become involved with local politics again, I find myself here in front of all of you. And like many people in Provo, many of the young people in Provo, I was thrilled about the parking laws and the change in parking laws for the city of Provo to crack down on predatory towing. And like most of the young people I've still talked to, we're still a little disenchanted with what seems to be still predatory towing. most of us feel like there has been an Obama-esque promise of change, but little that's actually happened in the changing of our day-to-day lives. Because most of us have felt the law was a little too weak and lacked the teeth to really make a difference, we feel like waiting till December to reevaluate the law like has been decided is probably a little too bit of a long of a wait. And in order to give us people more of a young voice on this subject, I would just like to let you all know that I'll be emailing all of you with some of our questions and things like that about things that we think that we can do. So I think my 2 minutes is up, so I'll get out of your hair. And ironically, I need to leave because my car's been parked for about an hour and a half. So thank you all very much.
In other words, this is a cautionary note for those who might be facing towing.
If you can stall him, we can get out to his car before he does.
We will refer those items to the administration as they come to us. To whom shall we turn at this point? Mr. Parker?
Cultural significance.
Yes, we spoke before. Did you want to make that announcement?
Yeah, our
Please do.
cultural significant thing has ended up not happening tonight. There's a major accident on the freeway, and I just got word from the director that some of the members of the group are as much as 45 minutes away. So,
Thank you.
So
Thank you very much.
we will call it, but what I'd like to make you all aware of is that the group that was supposed to be here tonight, Frequency, will be doing their end-of-year performance on the 6th of June, which is a Friday night, and at the same time, we will also be having the opening for the Summer Showcase, which will be held. We have 158 different art exhibits that are going to be posted in the Covey Center, the library, and the Utah County Health Building. We will be handing out 14 $250 awards for it, and so we invite all of you to come, see the art, hear the group, and have a good evening. It will start at 6 o'clock. So with that, I'm sorry we don't have a performance for you.
Mr. Miller, before Mr. Dearden leaves, I just wanted to let him know how grateful we are. I know I have an association with a assisted living center, and his group came and gave a wonderful performance, and I know that they do that. They donate their time and their efforts to people that really need it, and I appreciate that, Paul. They still talk. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for making that arrangement for this evening. Let us move.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman, if you want. I'd be glad to introduce item number 1, and we'll allow, if you'd like, or you can move to another item.
I noted that Mr. Sandberg was slated to speak to the issue. I don't see him. Oh, I beg your pardon.
Mr. Sandberg's here.
I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. So please proceed.
I'd be happy to introduce the item if you'd like,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman.
please do.
As you're aware, there are significant changes underway in the north area of the BYU campus with the impending expansion of the Missionary Training Center. BYU has been asked by their parent organization to vacate some ground, which fills a very important function in terms of their internal services to the campus. And so they have come up with a plan for relocating the laundry building and the auxiliary services building to the east side of 9th East and south of University Parkway. To do so requires a small rezoning. As you can see on this map, we got 900 East on the left, and the intersection of University Parkway is about midway through that outlined area. The area that's hashed, well, first of all, you recognize the existing LDS church, which currently serves a married student stake religious function. The area of the parking lot to the north is, that hashed area is currently zoned residential. And again, was, as you may recall, in the olden days, University Parkway used to cut through and go up to the Provo Temple. And so that area was a residential function. And then when 9th East was realigned, created an opportunity then to build the multi-stakes or the stake center there. But the parking lot remained zoned R18. And now with the changes that are being proposed by the university, they're asking to change that part of the zone, the entire R18 zone, that part of it to a PF zone to align with their existing plans for that facility. So with that, maybe we'll just invite Mr. Sandberg to come up and talk in detail about the proposal. Planning Commission has recommended favorably on the proposal to rezone, and so following a public hearing, then we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you, Wayne.
Sandberg, welcome.
Thank you, Hal. The neighborhood has also responded favorably. So to take a quick step back, the overall thrust of this is to enable the MTC to build 4 new buildings at the northwest corner of the area. So if this, the button here. Nope, that turns it off. Which one's the pointer?
You can borrow mine.
That's it. Great. Okay. And it doesn't show up in the slide, but this upper section of University Parkway and 900 East has been and will be rezoned part of the new MTC zone. And I'm sure this council remembers that process, where they worked through the issues of helping the neighborhoods there. But both the Pleasant View neighborhood up in this area and the Wasatch neighborhood in this area are pleased with the way we proceeded. And that has been, we've only taken the property that we needed to enable the new buildings. If we can move forward to the slide that shows where the buildings will be set, to allow these proposed new buildings. This is the current quad 7 of Y-Mount, where we have married student housing. And then the next slide should show where the buildings are proposed to be. In order to build a building, we can't cross either property lines owned by separate property owners or zoning areas. And so we only asked for the area of zoning necessary to allow us to build the laundry facility here and the auxiliary maintenance building to go here. One item of note that I brought up in the work meeting too, and that we're committed to still doing and we will do, there is a current circle where the road right now goes around all of the Y-Mount buildings in this way. Not all of them, but of the older quads. We will be closing that to residential traffic entirely. It will be open for emergency vehicle traffic, so the road will still connect, but there will be bollards to prohibit any residential traffic from coming into the parking lot area and vice versa. The parking area will then be blocked off, but any city emergency needs can be met by going through that area. Hal already noted too that we're precise at BYU. We rounded up to the nearest 10,000th. It's approximately 0.8857 acres. And our request to the City Council is for approval for this area here to be rezoned public facility. The church will then deed that to BYU. We'll record it, and then, as is our custom, we will take that new section and we will then re-deed it to ourselves at the county with an entire parcel, so it'll be connected to the rest of Y-Mount. And in the near future, we'll be bringing to the City Council other areas of campus that have not yet been put together that way. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. But I think that in our work meeting and in the other meetings, we've talked through the overall narrative arc of why we need to move the buildings and also a lot of the details of what's going on.
I invite members of the council to address questions. Mr. Sandberg. Please, Ms. Santiago.
In the Planning Commission meeting, it was mentioned by one of the residents that the, you can't see it on the screen, but the south end of the meeting house, LDS
Yeah, will
meeting
you go
house.
back to the slide that shows the Jersey barrier there by Fir Avenue? Yeah. So you're talking about right here.
Right there that leads to Fir.
Yes.
Are there any plans to open that for any reason? Do you?
No.
No plans?
And definitely not from
And that's the
BYU.
church. Yeah, that's the church-owned part.
This is the church-owned part, exactly. So this part that's remaining residential zoned is still owned and controlled by the church, will be managed by the facility management group. But we understand when we spoke to them, they have no plans to move those concrete Jersey barriers. At the same time, we don't understand there to be any city action to improve or change that area either.
Okay, thank you. And then the height of the buildings it'll be substantially lower than what you've had there as far as the complexes?
Yes.
Okay.
They will
I
be
just wondered.
one story, but they'll be taller than a one-story house. I'm not exactly sure the exact height, but our current quad there is 3 stories high.
Okay.
So yes, both buildings will be substantially shorter than the current quad building is.
And I missed the work session part, so I apologize for that. But when you said that it'll be going back to the county, are those?
What I mean by that is that this section here that we're asking to be rezoned, if the city council approves that, then we will go to the church, and they have put together this entire parcel into a new subdivision. They'll split the subdivision, and they'll convey to BYU this upper half. Once we have that parcel, then we will redeed this parcel into a larger BYU parcel. Okay. So it'll be one contiguous parcel.
Okay.
Please, Mr. Winterton.
Steve, I just want to thank you and BYU for the outreach that you've done over these last couple issues. I think you've made our job a lot easier. Look at tonight. We're grateful for all the
Tried to bring some
work.
controversy, but I couldn't drum it up tonight.
We're grateful for all the effort that you put forward
Thank you.
in trying to involve people. Thank you.
Appreciate that, and we'll continue to do that going forward.
Other questions, comments? We're grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other conversation, members of the council?
Is a
Mr.
public
Parker?
hearing. Just a reminder, it is a public hearing, and so
Yes.
I don't see any neighborhood chairs here, so just a reminder to open it at some point.
As I was going to ask our designated prayer whether he had any comments. Yes, indeed, this is scheduled for public hearing. I invite anyone to approach the podium and be heard. I invite a motion.
I move that we approve the zoning change as
Mr. Sewell, thank
indicated.
you. A second. Mr. Garrett, thank you. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We now invite Mr. Paul Glauser, the Director of the Redevelopment Agency, to come forward to present a resolution approving the 2014-2015 Action Plan update for submittal to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With any luck, this will be the last time you see this item on the agenda of this year. As you know, it's a long process that we begin each September soliciting ideas for use of the federal grant in the coming year. And you have had hearings already on February 18th and April 1st on the use of these funds, and have given direction at those meetings on how the funds are to be used. Subsequent to that, our staff have prepared the annual action plan as required by HUD, which is essentially the application to HUD to use the funds in the ways proposed here. And we have had a 30-day public comment period on that action plan, which ended on May 15th, received no comments during that period. And so tonight is the final public hearing before we submit this application to HUD so that we have the money available toward the end of the summer. Any questions I can try and answer?
Mr. Van Buren? No. Ms. Santiago?
I was just going to commend you for, I noticed in the action plan that it's only a 70% requirement to benefit low to moderate income families, but you have been able to keep that at 100% benefit to low to moderate, and I think that's impressive. I just wanted to...
Thank you. That's correct. And it has more to do with the council and the priorities the council has set and the types of projects you've chosen to fund. It's not a hard thing to do, candidly.
Thank you. This item also is open to public hearing. I invite anyone who wishes to address the item to please approach the podium and be heard. Mr. Van Buren.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the resolution as written.
Second, please. Thank you, Mr. Hales. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I now call for a motion to recess as the municipal council and to reconvene as the redevelopment agency of Provo.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. A second. Thank you, Ms. Santiago. All in favor? Thank you. The motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you. We'll now consider a resolution authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to enter into a parking facility agreement with Liberty Center Associates, LLC for the inclusion of additional for-lease parking in the Liberty Center project. And we'll turn once again to Mr. Polglauser.
As you're all aware, a little over a year ago, the Redevelopment Agency Board approved us to negotiate a deal for the sale of RDA-owned property just across the street here on 3rd West between Center Street and First North with Cowboy Partners, Salt Lake City multifamily housing developer, to develop an apartment project and housing there. We see this as a real landmark project in the downtown, and that it will be one of the first two housing projects to occur on Center Street in a long, long time, and we think that's going to be very important to continuing to build on life on the street and activity. We're especially excited to have ground floor retail, probably a restaurant, occurring in that property, which will further really bring great improvement and progress to especially this west end of the street. The developer has received Planning Commission approval just last week and is in the process of submitting a building permit application for the project. They're going to have a parking garage built into the project to serve their own residents, and over the last several months as they were developing their plans, it occurred to us that this may be a good opportunity for us to get a little additional parking into the downtown area, similar to what we did when we built the Wells Fargo parking garage 12 years ago, but on a much smaller scale. At that time, we assisted the developer of that project to get a parking garage to serve the Wells Fargo building, but also built into it surplus parking to be used by other things, such as the 63 East project, which you see going up over there now, and possibly some others before too long. In this case, the developers determined they could fit 20 extra parking stalls into the project is all. We'd hope they could do more, but because of high water table, they don't feel they can go any deeper into the ground. But we have talked to them about some deal points for doing that parking, and they're outlined in the staff report. I don't know if you want me to take the time to go through those tonight, or if you're already sufficiently familiar with those. Our proposal is that you direct that we prepare an agreement and enter into an agreement with the developer that incorporates these points and probably some other issues that still need to be worked out. But these would be the main points of the deal.
Is there any request for additional information? We have that documentation on the points before us, it looks like. Yes, Mr. Van Buren.
Just one question for Mr. Glasser. This will be paid for, as noted in here, by a HUD special purpose grant. Is there any other competing uses for that grant for this downtown parking purpose right now that we're taking from to give it to something else?
Not at this time. When a few years ago when we got the grant, we thought we might be using it for a new parking garage on the block north of the convention center. However, for a variety of reasons, that project has not been forthcoming. There is a deadline. We actually have two grants, two of these special purpose grants. One has a deadline for use at September 30th, 2015, the other in September 30th, 2016. In what we're proposing here, we would use all of the first one and about a third to half of the second one in what we're proposing. We think, we're not trying to just use the money up, but we think this is a pretty good way to use the money. It gets parking. It adds it into another building, so we're not building a big parking garage towering over things, and that way it's maybe a plus. And we use the money in a timely fashion, don't risk having to forfeit it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion among the council?
Mr. Glauser, the term of the agreement is proposed to run for 30 years. Are there other agreements like this one in place? What typically happens at the end of 30 years? Is that renegotiated?
The only other one that we've done like this has been for the Wells Fargo parking garage about 12 years ago, and it was also 30 years. We thought for consistency's sake it makes sense to go 30 years here again. That's probably a little shorter than the expected life of the garage, although you never know for sure. We don't anticipate that there would be any kind of renewal at that point. We anticipate there will still be a demand for parking in the downtown, and chances are the developer would continue to operate it in the same manner, or somebody would want to use the parking. So it would continue to be a resource, an asset, as far as getting cars off the street, or at least freeing up the street for customer parking as opposed to employee parking downtown.
Okay, and that would then be under the direction of the owner then of the...
The way this is anticipated, yes, it would be the same.
Thanks.
Any additional questions or discussion? Then I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the resolution as written.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Garrett. All in favor then? Thank you. That appears to be unanimous. We'll consider now a resolution authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to enter into a First Amendment to the real estate purchase agreement for the sale of redevelopment agency real property to Cowboy Partners, LC, for development of the Liberty Center project in downtown Provo. Mr. Glauser.
I mentioned a moment ago that a little over a year ago we entered into a real estate purchase agreement with Cowboy Partners. And as we now approach the closing on the property, a couple of issues that have come up over the last several months we wanted to bring to you, which we think require an amendment to that first agreement. The first of these is that Cowboy is setting up a separate LC liability company to operate this project. Instead of Cowboy Partners LLC, it would be Liberty Center Associates LLC, which is a pretty conventional way of doing things like this, to set up a separate company for a separate project. And so we propose that we substitute Liberty Center Associates LLC for Cowboy Partners as a party to that real estate purchase agreement. You may have noticed the last agreement, the parking agreement, was to be with this same new LC. The second item, and the more substantive item, part of this that we think requires an amendment, the original agreement says that they will pay us the purchase price of $750,000 at the time of closing for the property. They've come back to us since then and said, you know, it would really help us if we could postpone the payment of that purchase until after construction is completed and the project begins to stabilize about 14 months after closing. We've reviewed that with the administration, with the finance department. One of the main issues there is that the redevelopment agency has a loan with the city, an interfund loan of $660,000 that we took out at the time we purchased a part of the property. We're paying interest of 5.5% annually on that loan. In visiting with the finance department, they felt that extending the loan or deferring the cash payment was okay for the next 14 months. We would want to see, we're proposing 5.75% interest on what would essentially be a loan to Cowboy Partners for that 14-month period. That would allow us to pay the 5.5% to the city, which is well above what the city's getting on its investments right now, as well as another 0.25% for the city, or for the redevelopment agency. Cowboy has come back to us since then and said, you know, we could really use 30 months, and we've said we don't think we want to put our cash out there that long. But we will go, we think it's reasonable to go 14 months. So with those two items, we are proposing an amendment to this real estate purchase agreement with Cowboy Partners, and recommend those to you.
Questions? Mr. Glauser?
Mr. Hales. Paul, the we're paying that to ourselves?
We will be paying 5.5%. The redevelopment agency pays the city. We've been paying it for the last 6 years that we've owned the property.
And then you pay it right to the city?
The redevelopment agency would keep that 0.25% difference. The difference between 5.5% and 5.75% that we charge Cowboy.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the resolution as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Winterton. All in favor? It appears to be unanimous. Thank you. Our next and I believe final item for consideration is a resolution authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to execute a development and sale agreement between the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City Corporation and Mountain Vista Partners, a limited liability company, for the purpose of development, purchase, and sale of property located approximately 2820 Sierra Vista Drive, also generally known as Mountain Vista Business Park in Provo. This will be presented by Mr. Dixon Holmes.
Chair and board members, so we're here this evening to seek approval from the redevelopment agency to again allow the chief executive officer to execute an agreement. Briefly, Provo City and the redevelopment agency have owned Mountain Vista Business Park, formerly known as Ironton, for about not quite 20 years. This is the former Ironton facility, a U.S. Steel facility, which was a brownfield, has a long history in our community. Most recently, the history has been of derelict property, but at one time this was in fact very productive land, providing a lot of jobs. Predates Geneva Steel. Started operating in the 20s. It operated up through the late 60s. At that point, U.S. Steel discontinued its use, donated the land to Brigham Young University. Brigham Young University, through some of their agents, David B. Haight and others, oversaw the demolition of the property and were going to use it as a business park. At one point then in time, BYU decided that they were not in the business park business. It transferred to private hands, the private sector, and it has sat vacant for a number of years. Provo City was interested in the redevelopment of the property, or seeing that it be put back to a productive use, as it sat vacant and derelict for 30 plus years. The city engaged the state of Utah Department of Environmental Quality, and the previous owner, U.S. Steel, to see if there was some collective effort that could help bring the property back to a productive use. But one of the challenges was there was quite a bit of environmental cloud over the property of how potentially contaminated it might be, and that was part of the reason why it has sat vacant for so long. Through a cooperative effort, the property was cleaned to an industrial standard. In environmental circles, they talk about cleaning something to a background, meaning before the use, and then to this industrial standard, which means that there are still some levels of contamination, but there are acceptable uses for the use that would be permitted there. Anyway, a little bit of background. The city has then took an actual option on the property once it was determined that the cleanup was not going to be overly complicated or overly expensive. The city took the option, exercised it, purchased the property, and now over the last 14 or 15 years have been trying to put it back to that productive use. In the last 12 years, we've had 3 buildings constructed, and we have sold 4 properties, 3 of which have been now built on. Not necessarily a bad track record if you look at reconditioned, repurposed properties. However, it has always been our goal to have the property be more productive. As such, right now it is held by the redevelopment agency, which means it's not collecting any property tax. People are not employed there. And these are some of the goals that we would hope to accomplish, is to put it back on the tax rolls, to have people employed there for more capital investment to take place. As we looked around, we saw that there were other options or other models that were being put in place, and so the city put out a request for proposals to have developers partner with us in having the property put back to a productive use. 3 such proposals were submitted, 2 of those combined, and so then it was down to 2. And so again, the list was not super long on trying to develop this property because it is complicated. It is a large piece. There's still quite a bit of work to be done. And ultimately, MVP was the most interested and pursued the opportunity to develop the property and partner with the city. We've gone back and forth over the years. Do we sell the whole piece of property to one group and let them just sit on it and they develop it as the market is able? Or could the city maybe sell off portions of property? And that's what we've done over the last 12 to 14 years, selling the 4 pieces that we have. In the agreement that we contemplate, the city would make available property for development, the smallest, biggest piece of property necessary to develop product or buildings for employment to take place. And so that's what the agreement contemplates. Now, what we have for you, for the board this evening is, again, authorizing the chief executive officer to execute that agreement, which essentially allows us to move forward in placing the property back in the private sector. The city would be or the redevelopment agency, the city would be compensated for the property that is taken down and this building is built. So we would receive an interest payment. Again, we're putting up the property, they're putting up in the physical improvements. At such time that the building were ever sold to a third party, the city would then be cashed out for the original value of the land and the value of the building obviously going back to the developer. We have included in your packet a summary of that agreement, and again, the final agreement has not been completely finalized. We're going back and forth on that, but again, it would be our hope that if we generally move in that direction, if we can get approval from the redevelopment board, that then the chief executive would then execute that agreement, and we would continue to move forward with the development of the property. And we do have a representative of NVP here with us this evening if you have any questions. Also, Dave Oka, who has been very instrumental on our staff and getting us to this point this evening. There's been a lot of effort going into this, and hopefully we could answer any questions that you might have and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
So, Mr. Hales, we're going to be leasing with this company.
So they will actually develop the property. They will come to us and say, there's a 10-acre piece that we'd like to develop. Through their opportunity to do some due diligence, get their financing in order, get their building permits and such, that once they have the building built and occupied, essentially either having an end user or a spec building, that they would put the building together, and once the building is occupied, the city would start receiving rent payment at 6% on the valuation of the land, and that would continue into the future until such time they wanted to sell the building, and then the city would be cashed out for the value of the land.
Sell the building, or maybe the partner here would be wanting to buy it, or would that?
Yep, that could happen too.
And in the meantime, we get the 6% of the value of the land, and that, have we already established that value?
The value would be established based on an appraisal.
Appraisal that would be done at the time of construction, or
the appraisal would happen sometime in the next, we would imagine in the next 6 to 8 months. It could happen sooner than later. Again, part of the challenge that we're faced with is it's still a very large piece of land. There are still some foundations that need to be taken care of. This is not the Pleasant Grove Farmers Field that, and for those of you that are not familiar with it, we'd be more than happy to take you on a hard hat, rubber boot field trip of the property. So they would take the cost of again, repurposing the property, preparing it, building it, and that would be their benefit. And our part of the deal is just providing the land.
I see this as a unique challenge in leasing also. I mean, we've getting this because we can only get certain type of tenants on this property.
Well, so the zoning for this is planned industrial commercial. That's the same zoning that we have at East Bay. We don't necessarily anticipate an East Bay type development, although we are looking for upscale light manufacturing, light industrial uses similar to what we have out there now. So if you're familiar with the Action Target building, the AC label, Champion Safe owns the 4th piece of property, and they should be under construction for their facility in the next 6 to 8 months also. So we'd anticipate similar type of development.
Any additional? Ms. Santiago?
So and the construction would take place before you have a tenant, so would there be any benefit in, I guess you don't really know who would be using the building and how to construct it necessarily?
Right, so, and that, again, that becomes the opportunity and the risk of the developer that we transfer to them to go out, secure the financing, build the building, find a tenant. They don't get any money either until they have a tenant, so it's in their best interest to get a tenant, a good paying tenant, as quickly as possible. Once they do that, then the city would also receive its commensurate portion of the revenues from that. So again, it's a bit speculative, but the current path that we've been on has kind of gotten us where we are, and that's not bad, but we think that we can do better. But what we could do better with, and we're very appreciative of MVP, but again, there weren't people necessarily beating down our door with a big long line saying, hey, we want to do this. We wouldn't say they're the only ones, but we're very appreciative again for they've done projects similar to this and have been successful. We think that this is a good partnership, and we're happy to where we are.
One more question. That I guess we'd be subordinate only to the construction loan. Is that correct?
Dave Oka, city staff. We would need to be subordinate to the permanent financing also. In order to get the financing, we'd have to be subordinate to the long-term financing also. And so, we are not in a strong position, but we look at the reputation of the developer, and in order to kind of limit our exposure, we're doing this in phases. So that if one goes bad, the contract terminates. We're not at risk for the rest.
Again, so our position would be, it goes back to the bank who has a building. Banks typically don't like owning buildings. They like someone else to be in it also. It is at risk, and as Dave has mentioned, that it would be that phase only of which they've taken down for the building.
Is there a dollar amount for what the building might cost, what the construction costs might be for that project?
The developers here in Midbuilding.
Mike Haslam, I'm with MVP. We'll probably be in the construction probably $60 to $70 a square foot.
Did you say how much square footage there was?
Well, it just depends. Our initial,
whatever you decide to build.
Our initial proposal for our first spec building, it would be a 60,000 square foot building, which would be located, we're going to propose across the street from where Champion Safe is going to be, and across the street from AC Label, and kitty corner from the dentist. That'll give you a finished look as you come into the park. With the second building, another 60,000 square foot building adjacent to it. And I think that David showed you some pictures of it in a closed session meeting, and I have some here if you'd like to pass them around, of kind of a visual concept of what we're looking at doing.
Mike, do you already have prospective tenants or inquiries at least?
We have
on some of the spaces?
Yes. Yeah. Some of those, obviously right now, some have come and some have gone because we're not under construction.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get under construction,
Generates more interest.
When there's shovels in the ground, it has a tendency to get people more excited.
Very good, thank you. I'll entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution as outlined.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Miller. All in favor? Are there any opposed? It appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point, I'll call for a motion to adjourn the Redevelopment Agency of Provo. And is it necessary to reconvene as a municipal council?
No, since that's the last item, you can just adjourn the meeting in its entirety.
Okay, very good.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Van Buren, second. All in favor? It's unanimous and we're adjourned.
Look at that.